All right. Good afternoon. Today, I'm here to share an update on programming that many Kentuckians rely upon. Right now, our state and our country are facing some real challenges. Here in Kentucky, we're facing a $305 million budget shortfall in our current fiscal year. This is due in part to President Trump's tariffs and the negative impact they're having on the American economy. It's pretty simple from an economic standpoint. The higher the tariffs, the higher the inflation, and the less growth of the U.S. economy. Unlike the federal government, Kentucky must balance its budget. We must operate just like our families within our means. So moderate cuts are coming this fiscal year. They are required under law. Remember, one of the reasons we're seeing so much economic development is we are viewed as a stable place to do business. All three major bond rating agencies that have upgraded us have said fiscal responsibility has been a hallmark of this administration. We're also feeling the impacts of the federal shutdown, which has now reached the 20-day mark. Funding has stopped or will stop for a number of important programs. The combination of these events will affect how we operate as a state. So today, I'm going to talk about three programs, the impacts we're seeing, and whether steps can be taken to help. We'll start with the Senior Meals Program. Let me be clear, there have been no cuts to this program. In fact, my administration has directed more dollars towards senior meals than any other administration in state history. Before the pandemic, general fund dollars had not been directly allocated to this type of program. During the pandemic, federal dollars were provided to address senior hunger. As COVID funds expired, this administration and the General Assembly made the largest investment yet in general funds for this program, with $10 million appropriated for each of the 2 fiscal years. We've learned that our area development districts, or ADs, have nearly exhausted these funds, with more than half the fiscal year to go. My team has been working hard to find a solution, and it's not a simple budget transfer. Senior meals needed additional funds last year as well. We were able to fill the gap that year in 2 ways. First, we were able to provide one-time flexible federal ARPA funds. All of those have now been spent. There are no ARPA funds to address the current shortfall. We were also able to use some state funds, including vacancy credits, all of which are necessary to address that $305 million shortfall this year. So none of those funds are available either. So it was a bit more challenging. Thankfully, through the hard work of John Hicks, we were able to find a pot of money in the form of an appropriation to Medicaid for a study by LRC and the General Assembly, and then the implementation of that study within Medicaid. The original study was not done, and so the dollars are sitting there. From this appropriation, we are moving $9.1 million in funding to senior meals. My state budget director transferred these funds today after we discussed plans with the General Assembly leadership at the end of last week. I also requested that the General Assembly retroactively approve the movement of these dollars when they come back into session in January, which leadership has agreed to do. So again, this wasn't a routine or regular movement of budgeted dollars, but required we find a usable, specific pot of money. To be clear, such a pot likely won't be available in the future for this or other programs. No Kentuckian should face hunger. And while I'm glad we found a temporary solution, we must ensure that we understand our people's needs, as well as the cost controls and procedures for the senior meal program to appropriately budget and run these programs in the future. Because of that, in addition to the $9.1 million transfer, I'm also asking the Finance Cabinet to review the program with the ADs to ensure we provide sufficient future funding and are fiscally responsible at the same time. The Finance Cabinet will look at things like variation in cost per meal, what rules exist inside each program, and why the budgets vary oftentimes in similar populations. Ultimately, we must understand these variables to provide sufficient funding, because the way next year's budget is shaping up, the budgeted amount will likely be all that's available. Finally, I want to address the supermajority's wonderful change of heart, because I remember the past 3 years. I remember in March of 2022, when the supermajority ended the COVID emergency early, forfeiting $50 million in food assistance. At the time, I talked in many of the same terms that I've heard people recently talk. I said that children and seniors were going to go hungry. And because of that, I vetoed the bill and encouraged people to support our children and seniors. Yet that veto was overridden, and we lost out on $50 million of extra food for our people. Supermajority also openly supported the big, ugly bill, which will add $66 million in SNAP costs to Kentucky next year, undoubtedly lessening the food assistance that's going to be available for our citizens. But I'm always excited when people have a change of heart, when they come around to doing what's right, when they push out the red or blue and they say hunger is hunger, and we're going to support anybody who's fighting it, and we're going to oppose anyone of any party that's not doing enough, or we're going to encourage them to do more. So I'm excited that we can do even more to address hunger, and I hope to see these same public servants push back against the actions of the Trump administration that will increase hunger. Now, for an update on the federal shutdown, which is going into its 4th week. Several federally funded programs our people rely on are being impacted, and Kentuckians are about to be impacted directly. This includes the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or TANF program. TANF is where the state receives support from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services to help struggling families for a limited period of time. We recently had to rebalance that help. Those benefits are a set amount of money, and we have to provide them to the families that qualify. Before 2023, we didn't have as many families. The federal government said, okay, provide more benefits, but knowing that if those families increased, that we would have to rebalance it. That's what happened, and thus the rebalancing happened. But here's the tough news of today. Kentucky has not received funding for the month of November from the federal government for TANF due to the shutdown. It appears, at least as of today, we will not receive those funds from the federal government. However, I can announce that Team Kentucky will cover TANF through the month of November. We'll use state funds to prevent any disruption in assistance for families in November. And families should use their current benefits as normal. We're able to cover this for November, but we cannot at this time make assurances for December, and that's unlikely. This is a temporary action with hope that the federal shutdown will end and that benefits will begin processing as normal soon. Unfortunately, the shutdown is also impacting SNAP. At this time, the U.S. Department of Agriculture has not authorized SNAP funding for November. In fact, in a letter, the Trump administration has ordered the federal government not pay out SNAP benefits for November, and states to not pay money to the vendors to pay out SNAP benefits for November. More than 600,000 Kentuckians rely on SNAP. That's 1 in 8 of our people, many of which are children. This is a scary and stressful time, and Team Kentucky is committed to processing benefits the moment the federal government provides the funds. Those Kentuckians who receive SNAP can continue using current benefits as normal for October. Folks can visit the resources on the screen for real-time information on where things stand. My hope is that the folks in D.C. will understand the American people are not a negotiating tool. Things like affordable health care, support for food, those aren't political props. They are nonpartisan issues our families need and deserve. At a time when more people are saying the American dream is out of reach, we need leaders to be focused on making life easier, not harder. It's time they find a solution on healthcare to prevent so many people's premiums from going up and reopen the government to help families in two very important ways, because many families won't make it if both are not done. Now we have time for a few questions. We have a large list of virtual reporters. We will start out with Karen Czar.
Thank you, Governor. Governor, how long do you anticipate the 9.1 will sustain the senior meals program? And can the state be reimbursed for anything that they are having to pay for once the government shutdown ends? Thank you.
In the past, we have been able to float certain things like TANF and then get reimbursed afterwards. It is both our hope and our expectation that that will happen. Some states are deciding not to do it. Other states will do it. We're always going to err on the side of providing for our people. We talked to the ads today. This $9.1 million will be the maximum amount available through the end of the fiscal year, and everybody is going to adjust their programs accordingly. We all understand that there's a lot of need out there. The need continues to grow. We're going to try to balance this program with the funds that we have, and then we're going to use that time working with the ads, asking the right questions so the ads can educate us through the finance cabinet to understand the exact needs, where they are, and to make sure that we're putting all the best practices into place where we can feed as many people with the dollars that are available. Because this next budget is going to have some difficult decisions to make, and there's going to be limited resources in virtually every program that's out there. We've got to make sure that each and every one is going as far as it can. Bodie Brooks.
Thank you, Governor. I've seen the question asked over how this pot of money can be reallocated for this program when, earlier we've had a dispute over funding for Senate Bill 151 that was a kinship care law. Can you walk me through some of the legalese that allowed this pot of money to be reallocated in this instance, but prevented it in Senate Bill 151's instance?
Yeah, this is one where the General Assembly is going to have to come back in afterwards and agree to pass legislation that after we've done it authorizes the transfer, which we think is at least likely needed in this situation. But what this is a program that we discovered that was going to be implemented. We had the dollars on our side to do the implementation, but the General Assembly had said, don't go forward with that until we have and approve a proposal. Well, that proposal didn't come. We've been told it's not coming, and thus we worked with them directly on this one. The piece on foster care payments, first, there's not just an extra $20 million that's there within that budget unit, and second, it is a direct set of payments that the General Assembly didn't put a single dollar into. This is one where there is a separate budgeted amount that, thanks to, again, this agreement, it took both the General Assembly and the executive branch that were able to fund. Jaron Von Runnen.
Yes, Governor, thank you. So you said SNAP benefits will be processed the moment the shutdown ends, but for families grocery shopping next week, what immediate relief is available? Thank you.
So next week, they'll still be covered, but I know we're talking about November. My hope is that either the federal government will find a way to fund SNAP, which I think there is an argument they can, with even with the government shutdown, or the government will reopen in time for us to process those payments. But again, we've got a letter from the federal government where they're not sending the money. It's at least $100 million, and the letter says we're not to work with those vendors either. So it's a tough situation. It's one that we hope will be resolved earlier. My suggestion would be to go to every local community, to go to every local food bank, but this is one that's really going to hurt. And I hope the federal government can resolve it and ultimately put our people first. Tom Latek, Kentucky Today.
Thank you, Governor, and good afternoon. Gotten several emails from the supermajority complaining about why it's taken so long for you to come up with a plan. Can you respond to that?
Yeah, the two reasons that this was challenging is, number one, there was no ARPA funding available, which was available the last time. And number two, we have a $305 million budget deficit, which did not exist the last time either. So what the supermajority was saying is, oh, it's easy. You can just transfer a certain amount of money from one area to another. Well, Tom, we've got to cut all the areas because the law says we live under a balanced budget, just like each and every one of our families. So those dollars that would be transferred are necessary to reduce that budget, again, by $305 million. What we found is most times not available. There might not have been a solution here, but we were able to find one and, again, directly work with at least leadership of the General Assembly to get it through. But, Tom, let me just end by saying I'm glad that between March of 2022 and today, that they have changed their position on how strongly they support ending hunger in the Commonwealth, and I'm all for it. So listen, any push, any criticism where they want us to feed more people, I'm for, I will take, and we will work to make sure that no Kentuckian goes hungry. Mason Brighton, Spectrum.
Governor, can you explain why the state did not ask for more than $10 million annually in the last budget for Meals on Wheels?
So this isn't Meals on Wheels. That's a separate program overall, my understanding of how it all works. The cabinets each make an estimate of what will be needed for any fiscal year. The cabinet had a certain amount. The ads actually gave the higher amount to the legislature. The legislature ended up putting the total amount at the lower, which was 10 million. But let's just put it in context. So our budget had 10 million, and that was just a recommended budget. I think the ads put the request in for about 14 in the General Assembly, so that would be about 28. But what's been spent or spent and asked for is about 38. And so even if that amount had been in the budget, I think there'd still be a $10 million excess or overage that would have been needed for senior meals. So we would have been going through this same process. So again, that was, let me break it down. 10 million was provided last year, and we were able to find about $9 million additionally to support that. So that ended up being 19, not 14. This year there was 10 million. They need an extra 9.1, so that's 19 compared to 14. So again, the cost of this was in excess of any of the proposals that were out there, any of the asks that were out there, and would have taken the same steps that we've taken here. Sarah Ladd, Kentucky Lantern.
Thank you so much. I'm about the meal program. If you could kind of walk us through a little bit about what needs to happen next session or in the future to keep this from happening again, keep the program sustainable. And then if you could clarify briefly the TANF funding supplement for the month of November, where is that coming from and what's that going to cost the state? Thank you so much.
I'll get that to you from John. It's about $12 million that we're able to float primarily from, or at least partly from excess TANF funds we have right now to get us through that next month. But again, I want to make sure that I'm pretty clear in that December is going to be really challenging. To make sure we don't, well, this next budget, we are going to, between now and then, learn as much as we can about the internal operation of each of these programs at each of the ads to understand the cost per meal in each area of the state, any extra challenges, in transportation that they face, try to figure out if the current formula for sending out the money needs to be changed, because some ad districts are pretty close to budget and some are way over budget, which suggests either that the formula isn't taking into account some of the realities, or we just have policies and procedures that are different from ad district to ad district. There's going to be a set amount in the next budget, and we're going to have to tailor all the programs towards that, which means at a time when we don't have the amount of funding that we've had in the past, we may end up with a wait list again. I certainly hope we don't. But when you take $66 million out of SNAP, and remember, SNAP also helps to feed seniors, you just take a really big blow to the dollars that you have to ultimately provide food assistance for our people. Sylvia Goodman, Kentucky Public Radio.
Hello, Governor. Obviously we're hearing right now about the senior meal programs and the cuts that are you've had to make to that, or changes to the funding. Obviously, this is a $300 million shortfall that's being estimated. What other programs in the short term will have to have funding changes? What is that going to look like until the session starts? And when are you going to release, I suppose, your suggestions for cuts for the rest of the fiscal year?
So when we release the plan, it's not suggestions. It's a plan that will go into effect. So if you have a budget shortfall that is under 5% of the entire budget, which this one is under, then the executive branch is authorized to go ahead and address it. And that's what we're going to do. And we've got plans in from our cabinets, draft plans that we're reviewing, that we're working through with them. The cuts we'll make will go to the end of the fiscal year, which will be the middle of next year. So we have some time for that. We are going to do it as much as we can on things that don't affect programs themselves, but hopefully are either vacancy credits, different positions that we have not hired from that are in the budget, or different ways that we can cut costs. This is going to be a moderate budget reduction. It's one that we can handle. The next budget is going to be a lot harder, because if you look at the amount of revenue we're going to have is basically going to be flat. But when you look at the additional needs for education, healthcare, et cetera, those are going to be hundreds of millions of dollars more. So I'm not concerned necessarily about this budget reduction. What it meant is there wasn't an extra $9 million laying on the table, but it didn't have us cutting any of the $10 million that had already been budgeted for senior meals. It's the next budget that's going to be a real challenge that may impact these programs directly, especially where the federal government is not providing the same level of help that they did before. David Winter.
Thank you, Governor, for taking the question. You say that you want to close the gap between Democrats and Republicans. You're meeting tomorrow with Governor DeWine from Ohio. How does using terms like the big ugly bill help do that?
Well, I think calling a cut to Medicaid that's going to devastate rural hospitals in Kentucky, kick 20,000 people off their jobs, you can't call it big beautiful bill. I mean, I take offense to that. No, I'm not calling Mike DeWine names, nor would I ever. We've worked together well, but I think I can talk about different pieces of legislation passed and how they're going to hurt our people. I mean, I think it's pretty ugly to cut $66 million of food assistance, and I hope you do too. Madison Porter, WKYT.
Thank you, Governor. I apologize in advance if this is a repetitive question, but how will you ensure senior meal service fund allocation is a priority when looking into the next budget, now knowing that the $10 million wasn't enough?
So we put out a recommended budget, and everybody will be able to see our priority based on the amount that we put in it. But I just want to say, whether it's the General Assembly or us, it's going to be really challenging in this next one. We have been able to have years where there is no wait list for senior meals, and that's just going to be tougher as we move forward. I hope that the General Assembly continues to want that to be as small as possible, or for there not to be a wait list. But it's going to be dollars for education, or dollars for healthcare, or dollars for meals. I mean, we're going to be deciding between a lot of really important things. Obviously, this is one of the most important, but I don't want to lessen the tough decisions that not only we're going to have to make in recommendations, but the General Assembly is going to have to make. And I'm going to want to make sure that during that process, I step back a little bit and see where different dollars are going. But this is one where, again, I know people have used different words in describing how they think this process is gone or what they want to happen. I'm just glad we have so many people who want to fight hunger this badly. And I think that means that the next budget is going to be better for senior meals than maybe it otherwise would have been. Isaiah Kim Martinez.
Thank you, Governor. I was just curious because I spoke with a center in Nelson County who have adjusted their hours, their drive-through hours already because of some of these shifts and some of the spending. With that $9 million added, can you give us an example of maybe some of those changes that we could see kind of be common? I mean, are we going to see a lot of those roll back in hours? Will that be normal?
I believe this money will restore most of what the ad districts had hoped and needed. We think this is very close to that overall number, though the number of seniors needing help is growing. All right, so this isn't just a specific number that's out there. It's one that's growing over time, and that's one of the biggest challenges the ad districts have faced, and that's something that we through the finance cabinet need to get a better grip on. I believe that most of what they've cut back on can be restored unless they decide to take a different approach, knowing the challenges that are ahead. But I think most of what's cut back can be restored, maybe not all. But I think those seniors that were worried about not getting their meals are going to be able to get them at least through the end of this fiscal year. And then we'll see how challenging that $66 million SNAP cut, how challenging some of the other things are that we face. And finally, Edward Marlowe from WKDZ Radio.
Governor, thank you so much for the time. I was actually curious, why did something like this become what some have termed to be a political football? And do you anticipate the rubric maybe for seniors? A couple of ad development district authorities I spoke to said that almost everybody, if not everybody on these plans, were benefits. They fit the benefit criteria. Do you anticipate the criteria changing as you guys move forward with the 26-28 budget? Thank you for your time.
Well, we want to check across ad districts about eligibility, about meals per individual, just about all those different pieces. But let me say our ad districts, they're passionate and they're helping people, and they want to help as many people as they can. And we want to do the best we can to provide the most resources we can in a fiscally responsible way to help as many people as we can. Now, the challenge in government is the challenge for a family. You got a budget and you got to live within it. And sometimes that means you don't get to do all the things that you want to and all the good that you want to. And I know this may have seemed like a political football. What I love about it is everybody wanted the same thing, to feed as many people as possible. And again, to see folks going from cutting $50 million in food aid to pushing really hard to increase it, that's a good thing. That's something we want to see going forward. That's something that I guess in March of 2022 was red or blue. And now is hopefully nonpartisan because they said, Governor, go find a solution. We did. Maybe they think we should have found it faster, but hey, we all want to feed more people. And that's what being a Kentuckian is all about. All right, we'll have a Team Kentucky update this Thursday where we'll talk about a lot of other things, but relief coming to our ad districts, to our seniors. We're going to be able to help with TANF this next month, but certainly for the SNAP program, please hope that the federal government can both get a solution to rising healthcare premiums so that those don't hit the American people and reopen this government. Thank you all very much.